Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the thesis defense of María Luisa Fuster Zalduondo. First of all, I'd like to welcome our readers, Maite Oronoz Rodríguez, Chief Justice of the Tribunal Supremo de Puerto Rico, Supreme Court of Puerto Rico, and our dear Professor Jaime Ramirez. Thank you for being here. Thank you for reading our students' translation of this wonderful text, The Fundamental Civil Rights and Duties of the People. So without any further introduction, let me introduce María Luisa. She's going to give a presentation about her work. So go ahead, María Luisa.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Before I begin my presentation, I would like to thank Dr. García Nevares for being my thesis advisor, for all his help and support throughout this process, and Chief Justice Oronoz and Professor Ramirez for being part of my thesis committee. Thank you for taking of your time and helping me get through this ordeal. Let me just start. For this project, I chose a text written by my father, Jaime Fuster Berlingeri, entitled Derechos fundamentales y deberes cívicos de las personas. I always knew I would choose a text that would be legal in nature, because being an attorney, it just seemed natural. But I also wanted to— You
haven't started the presentation.
No?
No.
How do I do that?
You have to share the screen again.
I have to share the screen. Bueno, pero está bien, pero esta primera parte no importaba, but I'll share it and I'll get that out of the way. Thank you. Okay, sorry. Here we go. Anyway, so I was saying that I wanted to choose a text that was legal in nature because it would be easier for me, more natural, but I also wanted to work on a text that could be useful for other people. So at first I considered specific laws that have not been translated into English yet, and recent publications dealing with current and trending legal themes. But in a discussion with Dr. García Nevares, I mentioned my father's book, and we came to the conclusion that working with this text would make a wonderful project, and indeed it has. So now that my presentation is up, let me explain that this image to the left is the current cover of the book. The artwork is by graphic artist Maite D. It was commissioned by the Puerto Rico Civil Rights Commission for the first Puerto Rican Conference on Civil Rights held in 1992 at the Colegio de Abogados in Miramar. So the author, Jaime Benito Fuster Berlingeri, was born in 1941 in Guayama, Puerto Rico. He did his undergraduate work at Notre Dame University in Indiana. He obtained a Juris Doctor from the University of Puerto Rico Law School and a Master's in Law from Columbia University in New York. He was a fellow in the Law and Humanities program at Harvard Law School and a doctoral candidate in law also at Harvard. His areas of specialization in the field of law were constitutional law, federal jurisdiction, ethics, legal theory, and legal sociology. He started his professional life as a professor of law at the University of Puerto Rico Law School in 1966. During his tenure as professor, he also held the post of Dean of Students of the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras campus, in 1969, and was Dean of the UPR Law School from 1974 to 1978. He was named Deputy Assistant to the Attorney General of the United States in 1979, which position he held until 1981, when he was named President of the Catholic University of Puerto Rico. In 1984, he ran and was elected as Resident Commissioner of Puerto Rico in Washington, D.C. And in 1992, he was named Associate Justice of the Supreme Court of Puerto Rico. During his career, he also served as advisor to several governmental commissions, departments, and agencies. He passed away on December 3, 2007. This text, Derechos fundamentales and deberes cívicos de las personas, is a result of a review and update of two separate books but were originally written by Justice Fuster at the behest of the Puerto Rico Civil Rights Commission. One on civil rights of Puerto Ricans, published in 1968, and the other on civic duties, published in 1973. Both of these books, as well as our current text, were prepared as part of an outreach project on civil rights and civic obligations for the citizens of Puerto Rico. They were also used as teaching material for public high school students. In fact, during the mid-70s through the early 80s, excerpts of the book on civil rights were published by the Department of Education. While I was doing research for the book, I found this one. I mean, if you can see it, it's a very, it's a small book that was published by the Department of Education that has one of those excerpts, and they were circulated through schools. I also met with Executive Director of the Civil Rights Commission, Mr. Ever Padilla Ruiz, to find out if the book has continued to be used in recent years. He explained that several editions of the current text have been published since the late 90s, and the latest edition comprised 25,000 copies. I was happy to learn that the book is still being used as a teaching tool. The book is used at the University of Puerto Rico in the graduate program of public administration and at the Inter-American University as part of the curriculum for criminal justice major. The book is also in the repository of the Puerto Rico Civil Rights Commission and in the repository of several international and Latin American civil rights organizations. For example, the RIOT, the Red Iberoamericana de Organismos y Organizaciones contra la Discriminación, INADI, Instituto Nacional contra la Discriminación y Xenofobia y el Racismo, which is in Argentina, and the COPRED, el Consejo para Prevenir y Eliminar la Discriminación de la Ciudad de México. Also, as part of the Civil Rights Commission's public service to our citizens, in 2014, they established a program to educate municipal police agents on civil rights. This program is still ongoing. The book is distributed to police agents and discussed with them. And since 2016, the Commission has run a program for middle and high school students called Una Mirada a tus Derechos, where they give conferences and run age-appropriate activities in which the book is also used as a resource. The Commission has tried to establish a long-term program with the Department of Education, but have not been able to set it up due to the department's bureaucracy. They were, although able to implement it in the private sector at a school in Mayagüez. It was, I think it lasted for a couple of years, and it was very successful because they had the cooperation and support of the school's principal. The Commission has also collaborated with the Girl Scouts in the island. They have activities that are based on civil rights and discrimination, and have even created unofficial badges for these topics. So, okay, then let's just start with a project. The book is 239 pages long and is written in Spanish. I chose the second part of the book, dealing with civic duties. It starts with a preface by the author in which she explains why people need to know what their civic duties are. And the rest of the text is divided into 3 chapters. Each chapter is divided into subchapters and ends with a questions section that serves as a teaching exercise. Since we have limits to the length of our thesis, I only translated the preface, chapter 1, that presents the reason for the existence of civic duties, sorry, and section 1 and part of section 2, in chapter 2, that presents the civic duties towards the government. I did not include the question section of the chapters in my work. Okay. So, the main objective of my work when translating the text was keeping the author's voice while making the translated text comprehensible. Anyone who has heard Justice Fuster speak or teach a class knows that he had a certain rhythm and a manner of expression. He was a very resourceful teacher. He also had the ability to explain concepts well, simply, while maintaining a certain register in order to make that vocabulary part of the learning process. One of the challenges I encountered when translating the text was the frequent use of what I thought was a passive voice. Passive voice is used when the active participant in a sentence is not known or is not important in the discourse. When writing about legal issues, using the passive is sometimes preferred because taking away the focus from the actor can convey a sense of impartiality or objectiveness. However, the sentences in the text didn't have the typical structure for the construction of passives. In the text, these sentences were constructed with the pronoun se plus the verb. In Spanish, they're called oraciones impersonales reflejas or impersonales con se. They do not have a subject and the verb is conjugated in the third person singular. However, in English, we need to have a subject most of the time, so we can achieve the same impersonality or objectiveness, by using the passive voice. Another challenge in keeping track of was keeping the track of my sentence structures. Issues like the correct order of the components of a sentence, which in English is stricter than Spanish, and the omission of subject pronouns in Spanish, which cannot occur in English generally, require that I translated these sentences in a way that made sense in English. Sometimes I had to reorganize the sentence, and sometimes I used dummy pronouns like it and there to complete the construction coherently. Also, there was an issue of the author's use of the masculine form as the unmarked gender. The author addresses the reader as el lector or refers to el ciudadano in the text and thus asks something of such person. In these cases, the author responds in the masculine. In order to avoid using the masculine form, I chose to change the term into plural, eliminating the need to specify the reader's male or female, and the need to have the corresponding pronouns used. In terms of vocabulary, there were two specific words which were central to the text that made me pause and research to look for the most exact equivalent. These are convivencia and funcionario público. I checked the various meanings of those words, their uses in similar writings within the scope of legal work. For convivencia, I ended up selecting coexistence and community life, depending on the way it was used in the original text. The meaning was more technical or abstract, I used coexistence. If the use of the term reflected a more personal or tangible use, I selected community life. For funcionario público, I used public official. I relied on its legal definition and on the more popular use of the term official versus servant in current times. And I know Jane gave me some comments on that, and I'm reconsidering it. I might still choose the one official, but I understand. And that was part of my conflict throughout, this matter, choosing the right word. But then the last issue that I had to deal with were the sayings and the quotations that the author included in the text. There are 4 quotations in the text. Their sources are not referenced because the author did not include a bibliography or a works cited section in the text. So I researched all of them, and I included references in my translation to the specific text. The one by Gandhi is originally in English. The only difference is that the author used the word learned in American English instead of learned, which is in British English, which is what the source text had. I don't know if the source he used had it written in American English, or if he chose to do it that way because it was more familiar to people who speak or know English, American English. But I decided to keep it in the original British English because I like to go with the source text, and I don't think it's that difficult to recognize it. Anyway, I still am reconsidering if I will change it back to the American English just because of the recognition factor. I'm not sure. The quotation by De Hostos is in Spanish, and I did not find an English translation. Translated it myself. However, I did revise the translation you read in my draft this that is shown on the screen is what I did now, or how it reads now. The quotation on the preamble to the Constitution of Puerto Rico is the official translation of the government of Puerto Rico, which is found in the laws of Puerto Rico annotated, the version in English, of course. And for the quote by Lord Acton, I had to do a little more research because the author did not even mention his name in the text. I imagine that because it wasn't really important who said the phrase, he just wanted to use it. It's a commonly known, recognizable phrase. But when I went to the source, I used the exact words that are included in the text, which is not the same as the one used by the author, but it conveys the same message. So regarding the sayings, these are the sayings I identified. The only ones I had never heard of, the only one I had never heard of was the last one. And for this, I had to do extensive research because no one I asked had heard it before. I found another saying similar to it in the Refranero Multilingüe of Centro Virtual Cervantes. And I felt that it was appropriate. So I looked at it, the English version, but it was in disuse. So I kept looking for another English translation, and I found an unknown quote, which seemed appropriate, and that's what I use in my translation. So this is it. This is my presentation. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Ever Padilla, the current Executive Director of the Civil Rights Commission, and Mr. René Pinto Lugo, which is the former president of the Civil Rights Commission, and who asked my father to prepare this version of the book, for speaking with me and providing me with additional information on the book, its purposes and uses. I feel very proud that this work by my father is still bearing fruit, and I'm looking forward to continuing my work on this translation and finishing the whole text. Thank you very much.
Thank you, María Luisa. So now the defense is open to our readers, to our comments. So you want to start, Maite, or yeah, we go ahead.
Well, first of all, thank you, María Luisa, for inviting me to be part of this. We've known each other for many years, and it's a privilege to be here. I think this is a wonderful work. It's strange for me. Strange is another word. I think it's great that what I'm seeing and reading is the text of somebody that I knew, that I admired, that used to have the same job that I had, and so there was all this interconnectedness. The fact that he was really good friends with my father. So there were just a lot of things that came to mind when reading the text. It baffles me, and it's a good surprise that it's so old. It was, I mean, first reading in the 70s, and it's still so prevalent and so, ¿cuál es la palabra? So tan importante.
So relevant, yeah.
Relevant, thank you. That's the word. So relevant. We give currently, as part of the judiciary, we give seminars, and we have an outreach program, and this is what we teach most of the time. It's civics, rights and duties, and so it's great. I think it's not only that you got to translate your father's work, but that it's relevant in today's world, and it's something that I think it's important that we communicate and we expand on. Do I go in and ask questions? I don't know if
You can go ahead.
Ramirez quiere. I love the fact in reading the preface. I loved how you explained as a non-translator. This is my role, so it was fascinating to see the struggles that you had. Finding your dad's register, his tone, acknowledging that he was somewhat formal even though he wanted to be, this is a book for a wider audience, that you recognize that his text is still a little bit elevated, and that you chose to maintain that register and tone. And I think probably my first question has to do with the audience. You mentioned that this is not a jurisprudence book, even though it's a book regarding rights and duties.
Right.
Who was his target audience, and or more importantly, who do you think is going to be your target audience? And is that something that you took into consideration when you were translating?
Well, I did. I think that when he wrote the book, his subject audience was were the people in general. Specifically, I think this thing with high school and middle school students. I can imagine that maybe he thought it would be used in at the university level as well. And today, I would think that yes, those audiences would still be, I guess, a primary focus. But I've seen, when I was doing some research, I've seen that the book has been used at the graduate level and for other conferences. I can't remember right now where I saw it, but it was used internationally. It was, I found some links to theses in the United States and some in Spain, and I think one somewhere else in Europe, I can't remember. So I guess I would like it to be for general. I thought it would be used for general use, not necessarily for attorneys, for people, they're doing works related to civil rights and civic duties, but not necessarily, a technical fashion, because it doesn't really bring any of the legal backup, cases and laws and whatever, but just a general knowledge. So I guess those would be the people that it's addressed to, and obviously having it in English allows for, I guess, more access in other programs besides Latin America and Puerto Rico.
I'd like to insert something on that topic. I was thinking that this might be useful. There are quite a few English-speaking private schools on the island.
Oh, yes.
And this might be a very useful tool for them. And I'd like to say, if I may say, Maite, may I call you by your name?
Yes, please.
Okay. For someone who has twice said, I am not a translator, that was a very translator-like question. Asking about one of the basic principles I tell my students is, before you start translating anything, as soon as you receive a text, find out the purpose of your translation and the intended audience, the intended readership. That's basic to the choices you make. And I'll have more to say about that when it's my turn, but I do think that usefulness, there might be a lot of usefulness in the English-speaking private schools.
I agree.
Yes, I agree.
I hadn't thought about it, and I was going to ask you, have you thought of how to make it more available? Have you thought of how to make it? And I think schools are great, and I have an idea that I would like to suggest at the end. But have you thought about it?
Yes, I have. I have. I when I spoke with the executive director, Padilla, and he explained, his struggles with getting it established, getting a program established using the book at public school level. And he explained about the school in Mayagüez. That school is CESO, and that's an English-speaking school. So they use the text in Spanish when it would have been very, much more easier to have it already in English. So that did give me ideas of, I guess, contacting friends and, obviously at a very small level, because I don't know what complications what would have for the public school system in Puerto Rico, but at least in the private school, one has friends that are teachers, and one could try and get that, I don't know, to see if they would be interested in those, and giving the commission, the Civil Rights Commission, some support in that sense, trying to open up some doors for them, because they already have these programs set up, which are, could be very useful.
Right.
Yes.
I was very happy that you explained the problem with inclusive language. Obviously, Justice Fuster wrote, everything was written in Exmail.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So I was very happy, not only that you explained the problem and that you chose to use inclusive language. I thought that was a good change. And I think as a reader, I was pleased that you would do that. There, you explained it in your presentation, but you also in the preface, different words that you struggle with, and convivencia being one of them. I think in that section you could I think it would benefit from having maybe examples of when you used
Okay.
each one.
Yes,
Sure.
I agree.
Okay.
To give
Yeah,
the
definitely.
reader more information.
Mhm.
And there was, trying to look for my notes. There's a section that, okay, there's a section when you, and before I ask the question, and I also like the repetition that you chose. I think, and I agree, I think you see it in his opinions and his resolutions. He had a very particular way of and a very particular way of speaking. And I think that was because he taught when he wrote, I think he was deep down, he was
a teacher at heart.
He was a teacher. So I think the repetition in his text, I think part of it is it's the legal formation. We tend to use the same, like two adjectives
Just go over it. Mhm.
go over and over. But I think it's on purpose when you want to emphasize something. So I like this, the way you describe your struggle, what to do with it, and then that you stuck with, it's his voice was in fact the use of the repetition. So I like the fact that you retain that. And I had a suggestion. You have footnotes. For example, when you do the Yostos code citation, that you change the numbers in the text, and maybe you do it another way so that you don't change the numbers.
Of the footnotes in the original. Okay, yeah.
The original in the text.
A little sign or something.
Jane, you can jump in.
I didn't follow what we were talking about.
With the footnotes?
Yeah, I remember the footnote when you stated that you did the translation, and I'm going to talk about that too. But what are we talking about with the footnote numbers?
The footnote numbers, because I used the footnote number 1 then, and since that is not in the text, what Maite is suggesting that I keep the same notes, the same footnotes as in the text.
In order,
but in order, to be more.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Because we do sometimes add translators' footnotes.
Right. But we can mark them.
I don't know that we always change the
numbering.
I have seen it both ways.
okay.
I've seen that one being taken out of order, and I've also seen it just, this book has 111 footnotes and this one has 113 footnotes because there were, so it's been done more than one.
Let me get this clear. So you added a footnote on your preface, and that changed the footnote numbering on the text, or you added
not in the preface.
No, it's in the translation itself.
In the translation, okay.
Yeah. So the footnotes in the translation don't
match. Yeah.
Match. Sorry, with the ones in the text.
I don't know that that's a problem.
No, no, it's just a suggestion, and I understand.
And it could be
Because
done
it's
either way.
Symbol instead of a number, but it's, I mean, it's fine.
Right. Yeah.
Word doesn't like to do that.
No,
No, but I have some ideas of how we can go.
You can go over those.
What do you not like to do, Luis?
No, the word doesn't like to do that. It doesn't
Word
have
doesn't.
just one sequence number, but we can trick it.
Mhm.
There are a lot of things
Is
Word
that-
doesn't like to do.
put a superscript
symbol.
letter,
Or,
and then just remove that footnote and add it as part of the previous footnote,
Right.
and make it look like
That
another
might be nice.
footnote. Yeah, we can do. We
you can work on that.
Yeah. Yeah, so that it really shows that it's a note from the translator.
Right, and not part of the original, sure.
Yeah, we can work it around. That's a good idea.
Mhm. Okay.
looking at notes. Jane, you can jump in whenever.
Thank you. I will. I do.
You're the translator. I'm just like a lay person, a lay audience.
All right.
For
Since
the
you-
audience, you're really making good.
mention that
good
again.
comments.
Since we're on that footnote, I am going to mention that because I believe you identified it by saying my translation.
Yes,
Now,
yes.
this is something in several, and I don't know if Aurora has been present for these discussions, but in several of the thesis defenses that I've been in the last couple of months, we've been talking about this because what does my translation really communicate to the
Yeah.
reader? Who's the me? Was that the original author who translated it, which would have been a possibility? Was
Right.
that you? Was that you got this from some other translated source? So I've been advocating, claim your translation.
And I
Sign it.
agree with you. I agree totally.
Yes,
Yeah,
For
you
the-
should say translation,
In
ML.
Spanish, I think in
just
Spanish
put-
it's clearer.
Like usually I would say translation Fuster, but you've got a problem here in that the
Oh, and this
author
one I
and the
do.
Just put
translator.
ML instead.
So your initials or
Uh-huh.
or María Luisa or MALA Fuster or whatever, but some version just because
Hmm.
the readers should be able to tell who did what.
I agree, and I hadn't thought
So-
about it until I read your comment, definitely.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. I never do this. I never send the comments ahead of time because
Yeah.
I don't want the student to be nervous with all these new things. No, I have to change things before but I know you have very short time. So
Yes,
Luis had asked me if I could do that. So
yes.
that's why I sent them ahead of time. I forgot you already knew that.
I
So,
like that idea.
okay.
I think for the
Same.
reader, it's better to see it like that. Yeah.
Sure. Definitely.
Can
You
I?
don't
Can I
have
ask?
to be invisible. Go
Yeah.
ahead. I'm sorry.
Can I ask you? Maria Luisa mentioned something that you had recommended, Jane, with the funcionario público and empleado.
What
To use civil servant.
So
I
you
did
use
mention
civil
that-
servant and public. I think public officer. Is it you?
Okay.
Yes. Public.
I
office.
said that I've always thought of public official. I think of that as being someone in a position of authority.
Like
And
an elected
there are
person
public
or?
employees who are not officials.
Mhm.
So
And I understand what you're saying, and my initial translation was civil servant because that's the word I grew up with.
yes, me too.
And but when I looked it over, I wasn't sure, if servant wasn't, even though it's a concept, I don't know if it's
Yes.
that current anymore and if it's
But
correct.
maybe it
or-
doesn't hurt people because of the very theme of this book.
No,
To start
definitely.
thinking about servants.
right.
But I'm not really I'm not trying to talk you into using civil servant. But I did check on the USPS website and
I
see,
know.
yes, they still take the civil service
Yes, and the exam
exam in order
hasn't
to work
changed.
for it. So That's still civil service. Even though they've got another name for it. On the website, they had another name,
Really?
but then within the text, it's explained that it's the civil service exam.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I'm torn. I don't know that there's,
Yes,
I noticed that you did use civil servant once.
I did.
Mhm.
I did. It gets hard. I go back to it. I can't help it. But
Is that a problem? To use a different term for the
I don't
same
know.
thing?
Is it?
I don't know.
I don't know.
But as I said, to me, official gives the idea of somebody who's got an authority to do something.
Okay.
And a civil
I will
servant
think
can
about
be
it.
someone who just sorts the mail.
Mhm.
So,
Which is
I-
somewhat different in Spanish between empleado y
mhm.
funcionario.
Y funcionario. Sí. Lo que
And we
pasa
can
es
do
que
that. You can do that. You can do public employee and public official. Knowing when to use which, that might get a little complicated too.
yes, I have to give that a little bit thought. Definitely. More thought.
It's an issue in Spanish as well.
Yes.
People don't necessarily know what one refers to and the other. So
I looked at, now I would have to check my notes, but there was this, I can't remember right by heart, the law that used to define funcionario público.
Mm.
And I know I read that and I used it, in part of my analysis in order to choose, the term, but that law is not current. I mean, it was derogada. So
Part of
it's
the
just,
civil code?
yeah.
Was part of the civil code?
No, it's a separate, it's not part of the civil code, no.
How did it use, what word did it use?
Es que it defined, I'm trying to look where I left my notes. It defined funcionario público. I don't know if it was ethics or from the ethics office or the,
Probably from the ethics office.
yeah. I think it was. I don't think it was something from the Department of El Trabajo. I can't remember that part. I'm almost sure it's from the ethics office.
Is it the one that you mentioned in your preface?
Yes.
Sí,
Yes.
you mentioned governmental ethics.
Pues, that was it. Okay.
Well, it's been derogada.
See, they changed. They updated their law. So
They updated the law, but the definition is still used. Which is,
I'm sure.
funcionario, it refers to somebody, as you mentioned in the preface, that it's either elected or appointed.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
judges and senators and representatives are
Are
funcionarios,
funcionarios.
but the clerks, the trabajadoras sociales,
Son empleados.
civiles son empleados.
Right.
Because they're hired, they're not appointed or elected.
Right.
That's very good
That's
That's the
So
difference.
that's what I need to make sure that I
Criteria
get
there.
that. Right.
Sometimes it sounds very redundant, but it happens to us all the time. If I have to make an announcement or send a communication, los funcionarios o funcionarias y
Sí, empleado.
now to try to include the gender inclusiveness, el funcionariado del Poder Judicial, los empleados y las empleadas, but it's you're referring to two different bodies of employees.
Right. Definitely. Same. And I think I maybe that's why I use civil servants once in the text. It might be, I don't know. Because most of the references that he used in the book were to the public the funcionarios,
Mhm.
because it has to do with the elected, officials. But I will definitely take a look at that. Make sure that I'm consistent.
That's good.
I'm just gonna add that there is currently in Puerto Rico a civil servant reform ongoing, as you probably know, by the board of la Junta de Supervisión Fiscal, and they call it that. They call it the civil servant reform.
That's good to know. I didn't know that. Okay,
That's why I checked the post office to make sure that term is still in
right.
existence. And
No, I know it's still used and,
And we actually have the translators that work at the Junta de Supervisión Fiscal are graduates from our program. So
Really? Oh, wonderful.
so we can consult with them. Actually, I think
Yeah.
I'm having breakfast tomorrow with one of them, so I can consult. I can consult.
check that out. Okay,
So Maite, are you're done? with your
I think I've covered the things that called out my attention the most. I would love to hear Jane's comments and questions.
and you also here, you're perfectly welcome to
Thank you.
jump in and make comments on whatever was said here. So, well, I'll start out with the business-like one that I never like to bring up, but I guess I'm even famous for this because Aurora quoted me recently in a thesis defense. But do you have a style manual that you're using, and what is it?
yes, I was using MLA, was it the 3rd edition, like the graduate, the black book?
Okay, I work lightly with so many that I don't have any of them memorized, but I know I have just learned this year that they're no longer asking for the city of publication.
Well, I haven't read that, but.
And I do see most of the students who are using MLA or
Not using it.
CMOS
Okay.
are CMOS is the one I know the best, the Chicago Manual Style.
Okay,
But most of them are providing us with entire URLs so that the online sources we can just click on. And they're
right.
getting that from the style manual. So
But my copy, maybe I'm using an old copy, but my copy of the MLA scholarly publishing, I can't remember the right complete title, that one didn't ask you to include the site, the reference, but I know that the current MLA, the other book, which is the one they use in high schools that I know a little bit better because my
Kate Turabian.
my nephews and nieces use it, so I have to help them with it. And I know they do include it, but that was a difference between the book that I used. I don't know where it is. But I'll check. I mean, I was trying to use MLA. That was what I was trying to do.
And that's what I wanted to know. I am not an absolute stickler for it's just that for you have to follow it exactly, because some things aren't included and you just have to use some common sense there.
Sure.
And you did. I didn't feel like I could recognize that you were following any one style, and yet your work was consistent. It was clear and complete. Other than, if somebody wanted just to be lazy and not have to Google something, but actually click on a link, that would be something else again. But what struck me with your work when I first started reading was, this is professional writing. This is what professional writing looks like. And I was feeling this during your preface. I'm going to ask a personal question. Do you feel like you're stronger in one language or the other? And did you grow up bilingual?
Yes, I did grow up bilingual, and I always have felt stronger in English, even though I know it might not be perfect. And my teachers at college would, shred to pieces my papers, but I always thought, it was easier in English.
Okay. Well,
I moved a lot during my my elementary and high school years. So I studied here and there, and it was easier in English, I guess.
Because and I'm not going to go in great detail on this, but I'm always curious about that, because while obviously growing up bilingual is an enormous advantage, trilingual is even better. I mean, this is great. It's wonderful. I wish all our kids, my children they were all born and raised here in Puerto Rico, and we sent them to public school on purpose. My husband was Mexican.
Mhm.
So we were both foreigners.
Yeah.
Here in Puerto Rico. But somehow some of my students who grew up bilingually have a little bit of a disadvantage, because they have a harder time relying on their ear to hear when something doesn't quite sound right.
Mhm.
And I did come across that several times, and I've
Yes.
marked them, and where if I switch it to Spanish, it's okay, that sounds right.
Yeah.
In
But
Spanish.
it's,
So because we do have this tendency, and those of us who've lived in Puerto Rico for a long time, I mean, I'm coming up on 51 years now that I've
Wow.
lived in Puerto Rico. So I came here as a newlywed. I find I'm not as confident in my English
yes.
sentence
understand.
structure as I used to be. So I understand where that's coming from, but that's something that somehow you need to watch for.
I know, and I understand what you're saying. And I've found that since coming back from college, I haven't gone back to the States. And even though when I work in English part of the time, it's very structured in the sense, I'm writing contracts and I'm writing deeds and I'm
Yes.
writing, so the language is very specific.
Mhm.
But when I have to start writing something like this, I see that my English has gotten worse. Sometimes I forget, and I forget my, I start writing and I'm like, oh my God, should this be this way or that way? And I just can't remember, because it's not that, I've been away from the States for many, many years, so it's harder. And I know.
I was delighted to see that you're familiar with Ngram Viewer, because I use it constantly.
I like it very much.
Because I'm not confident. We do have to remember that it uses a specific, what's the word? The group of books that you take it from. Help
The
me out,
corpus?
please. Corpus.
Right.
That uses a specific corpus. It's not all of the English language.
Right.
It's just the Google Books
Mhm.
corpus, but still, I
Yeah.
find that one very, very useful. And I even gave you a link, I think, in one of my
Yes.
early comments. But back to the actual project. This was fascinating to watch, and to read your preface, because I think this is unique. Not only is the author famous, but he's also your dad.
Yes.
And that has to have created a conflict here and there.
Oh, yes, definitely. I would, when I was going through the process, I would, suddenly just go out of my room and tell my mother, was he crazy? Why would he do this? What's wrong with it? And that's the part where I wish I would have had him here, so that I could ask him and tell him, there were parts also because he wrote these books. He wrote them originally late 60s, early 70s, and then they were revised late 90s, early 2000, right? But I'm sure that he didn't change much his style in those years, between those years. So it was written in a way that I think that if he would have started out later, he himself might have, chosen other ways to write it, to explain his things, because obviously with all the years of experience and with the different changes, I think that once he got into politics, he had to, you know, even, I don't want to say lower his register, but he would have to, you know, make things a little bit more easier to understand, just to make sure that you reach everybody out there. And I think, you know, it would have been good to have him, you know, at that moment. But yes, it was very interesting. And sometimes I would just at least, you know, say that he's wrong, I'm not doing this, but then I would go back to my mission that was to have him here, you know, do this in English.
Okay, and that's exactly where I was heading. So thank you. You said exactly what I wanted to hear, because if we just wanted to have a nice textbook on civil rights and civic duties, this one could have been edited and smoothed out and made more readable with
Definitely.
less repetition, less introduction, more straight to the point, but it wouldn't have been him.
Right.
And there's a value to old books.
Definitely.
There's a value, and I don't know how the word procer is something I've learned not from dictionary, from hearing it. So I'm not entirely sure of exactly what the definition would be, how many centuries back you have to be considered a procer, but I would put him in that category.
Oh my God.
And there is value.
Thank you.
I mean, I was impressed. I knew about him. I've been here long enough, in Puerto Rico long enough to,
Sure.
I know that name. And I am pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I heard him speak on television once and was impressed. And so I have a favorable memory, a picture of him from what I've known and read. And there's a value. I mean, when we never have the right word to distinguish. Estadounidense, como estadounidense. When I read something that was written by Abraham Lincoln, I don't worry about whether, well, that's a funny way of saying it, or,
Right.
you know, it's because it's Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
And there were, I know there was one place when I said, could you just this once not do the repetition, because it really sounds strange here.
Strange.
I don't remember what it was, but and then gave suggestion. I think this might have been in the second half, so you might not have read this yet.
Okay.
I suggested a way to keep both of the words, but make one of them into a verb and
Okay.
change the sentence a little to make it smoother. But in general, I just felt like that was, yes, it's not going to be quite as easy for an 8th grade civic student to read as something that's written, that's dumbed down for 8th graders.
Right.
But there's value in reading that was written by a real person who helped shape the nation. So, so that must have been a delicate balance for you.
It was. It definitely was. And the other issue I had when I was reading is that, again, when I read it the first time, I felt like this is not really a book. This is him dictating a course, a class, because it felt that way, but you still had some conventions of a text, so it also made it, sometimes difficult as well, because again, I would read and in my mind, I could see him talking, but then this is the written word. So how do I balance that and get across that same, I guess, intent that he had when he wrote it? It wasn't easy. wasn't easy. I hope
Yeah.
I got more or less there.
Maite,
James, I don't think Maria Luisa is going to say it, but I'm going to agree with you. I think by all means, Jaime Fuster is a prócer. And I knew him. I knew him well. I have read him over and over, and I was impressed. Maria Luisa, I didn't know how many degrees he had. I knew the basics. I didn't know. I just kept reading, and he went this, and he did this, and I was like,
He
was
did a lot.
so smart, and he was so intelligent that this book that is still very
Mhm.
elevated
Current, yeah.
was his
It is.
that's how smart he was. This is his simple way of saying things, and it's still very elevated. But I think just his brain he was so educated and so so smart. So I think to him, I think he probably tried to make it very
I know.
it's just that it's still
It
he
was
couldn't
hard.
help
And
himself.
no, it wasn't. And that's what I'm
Right.
telling you, that was this part of him, he prided himself in his education, and he also wanted everybody, to share, not just in him and in his love for learning, because that was for him the most basic thing that you could do, that you could give to other people, and when you can say something properly and correctly, why wouldn't you? Unless it's something that is so not understandable. I don't know. That was very much his way of seeing things. So I don't know.
And that's great with me. I'm the daughter of teachers. I'm the mother of teachers. I'm the mother-in-law of teachers. So
So you understand.
And I was born in the same decade as your dad, so I understand that. And then one of his degrees he got in South Bend. That's like 2 hops and a skip from where I grew up in Northern Illinois. So I felt a lot of points of contact there. But
Sure.
I'm going to move on to the more mundane.
Mhm.
And this one, I want any of you who can set me straight, please. We've got 2 lawyers. We've got, with Aurora, 3 translation professors. Somebody set me straight on civic and civil.
And I'm so sorry, before anybody comes in, I know, and then I started seeing there were mistakes on my part that,
So were they
should have been-
mistakes or?
No, there were mistakes. And sometimes, and I guess I just get confused sometimes saying civic and civil, but there is a difference. So.
Okay, so because I wonder whether it's just a habit that we always say civil rights and we say civic duties. Because when I saw, and there are a few places where Maria Luisa wrote,
Yes.
at least one where she wrote civic rights, and 2 or 3 where she
Right.
wrote civil duties. And I thought, well, really, why not? So if there's a difference and someone can explain it, that would make me very happy.
I don't know what.
Attorneys.
I've always thought, I don't know the answer. I've always thought of civic duties and then rights as civil. I don't know, but it's just that I learned it that way. It's not that I know that if there's a difference.
Yes, but I think there might be a difference, maybe in the sense that
Let's see.
when you're talking about rights and duties, about I don't know how that could make a difference, but I think it does.
Well, they both have to do with citizens, right?
Right. Yes, and
And
they
we-
have.
The course about living this sistema de vida, as he often wrote, in which he wrote his way of life.
Yes.
It's called a civics course,
Mm-hmm.
and it includes civil rights. And I've always kind of thought civil might have been chosen partly for political reasons, because that's all of us want to at least be civil. So if we're not even of allowing people basic civil rights, there must be something wrong with us, which of course there is. So, so I thought that was probably a good choice from the selling it point of view, but still,
I'm really not certain.
Okay.
It would be interesting to look it up, definitely.
Well, I looked a little bit up,
Okay.
Good.
and I think that civic has to do more with obligations and duties to the government and in the government, while civil is more in the relationship of people, of the community, between ourselves. So it is one, I think that civic has to do more with government and civil has to do more with society.
I'm not certain, Aurora, because I
would have thought it's the other way around.
because I think
No, really.
I just did a quick research here, so I am subject to expert opinion.
it's when I think of civic duties, I think it's those duties that we have with each other as in a community, in
As a community.
democracy,
Well,
como de convivencia,
cívicas.
so that we can live in peace and in an ordered democracy. They're not imposed by law. It's
It's not
necessarily
moral, but
it's
like
how we have to all have the same. It's just how we behave with each other so that we can live as a community. That's the way I see it.
it's like natural law.
I found another one. That says civic usually refers to the responsibility of the citizens, such as obeying laws or otherwise following the rules of the community. The civic duty is behavior towards the constituting society, while civil is has to do more with personal interactions. That's pretty much what I'm finding in all the research. I mean, in the quick research that I'm doing here, I think in English at least, this is what I don't know if this is right, but this is what I'm finding.
I just thought of something. Civilian is somebody who's outside of the structure.
The government, yeah.
So military usually, but yes, it can be used in other.
I tend to feel like the civil duties is within the people and towards the government, whereas the civil is like it emanates from the government.
From the government.
Like your rights against the government, or your rights frente al Estado.
Versus
What
the
rights
government.
do you have?
But you will have civic duty, right? Not civil duty.
No, it's civic duty. Yeah.
Whatever.
And wherever it said something else, it's my mistake.
Yeah. But then it will be related to your to office in government, to holding office in government.
No.
No.
Okay.
I think.
Go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, please. This is your.
Okay, so because I'm thinking that when you think of civics, again, your relationship between the people, between the community, and I don't like to use the word moral because it can go beyond that, but it's that idea that it's that's why I talk about natural law, because it's a concept that it's not, or it shouldn't be determined, like contained, like where laws and regulations and things are done. It's just because it's natural to the fact of living in a community, of being amongst others, and how to better, make that situation work. Versus the civil code, the civil rights, and makes me think of civil code. There must be something there that is, it's embodied, or is, what would be the word? It comes down from our legal
framework.
provisions or a more structured way versus the general being, I don't know, of the other, the duties, or I don't know. I think there must be something that has to make this difference between where it really originates, or I can't remember now.
I think I found something that I think defines what it's civil rights are the class of rights that protect individuals' freedom from infringement by governments. So it's, and I think what you were saying, I think they fall from the Constitution, certain laws, or
They're codified, or they are established, not codified, but established, or.
And I think maybe I think civics, the civic duties are probably gonna change also depending what community you're defining, or where you live, or what the practices of that particular group of people abide by. So I think that the duties could change depending on where you are, I think. I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's interesting. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
And
Well, anyway,
this
the
is
more
part of the
mundane part.
reason. This is part of the reason why I fell so in love with translation studies, because you get into these discussions trying to get the la medula of what the word is, and it's fascinating.
I've been trying to find a quotation that I've heard many times, maybe Luis or Aurora knows who it's from, that no one gives a text a closer reading than a translator.
I think I said it myself. You can say it's mine. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I won't, because I know I found it
in El Quijote. In El Quijote, Cervantes talks about the reverse of the tapestry.
Same idea.
To refer as the translation, that we see the making of the text, of the textile. We see the reverse of the tapestry. But yeah, it is. I mean, I don't know. Whoever said it really knew what they were talking about.
So anybody who has submitted their preface to their thesis to a thesis committee should be aware that they're getting a closer scrutiny that most texts ever get, because it's translators who are looking at. It's not just writing professors. It's translators who are looking at your preface. Okay, I'm almost done, and I just want, there's one more thing I felt like I ought to bring up. The one thing that really bothered me is, and it came up several times, and I don't think you've seen the second half of the comments, so you might have missed it, but I too am very glad that you wanted to use inclusive writing, that you went to the plural. I thought that was the right decision to make. One time when I thought you slipped up, you went back to the singular, and you can straighten it out very easily just by going to plural again. But one thing I really don't think you can do, and I don't think it's even fair to the author, because when he wrote it, nobody would have dreamed of doing this. I wish you would not use it referring to a human being.
Oh, I saw that. Yes. And I don't know why I did that, to tell you the truth.
It comes up several times, and
it's wrong, and I know.
And there's other ways of getting around that. And then even just the it, to when you're supplying a subject. Sometimes instead of it makes us feel this way, you can say this.
Right. I agree.
And that sounds a little more, that's easier on the ears.
Definitely.
But so that's a habit I think you want to look for and try to stop doing that. But I thought did an excellent job. And as I said, it felt like professional writing. You could see the care in the formatting, in the logical train of thought, in the way you set things up. I know you're a professional woman. I know you're a lawyer. I'm sorry to say this, but lawyers are not famous for always being good writers.
I know. I know.
So I've translated some contracts that, anyway, but
Well,
you approach this professionally.
Thank you.
And with a great deal of thought, and obviously with a great deal of love as well.
Yes,
So
I did.
I enjoyed the work very much. I hope that you can translate the first half and make this available. I'd like
Yes.
to read it.
Thank you, definitely.
I'm glad you sent me the complete source text so I can read all of it in Spanish.
Yes.
But I'll admit it's easier for me to read English. So
Sure, I understand.
okay, so that's my comments for today.
Thank you. Thank you. And I
Tanya,
like to say
do you
that-
have any other comments?
No, I like to say that thank you for your words, Jan. And I think that going through my studies in the program have helped me become much more aware of the way I write and of the way things should be done. And so it makes me feel that I did learn. I did learn how to do things the right way. Thank you.
Good. That's good to hear.
Well, it's good that you say that, but because that means that all of us at the program have done our job well. Because it's
I don't know. I don't think María Luisa ever took a class with me.
No, I didn't.
It
So-
doesn't
But
matter.
it doesn't matter.
It's still
So any of the errors in punctuation, that's because you didn't take my class.
Oh my.
So yeah.
So
And
anyway,
I'm gonna send some attorneys then your way, Jane.
Sure. How much can I charge them per hour?
A lot.
fantastic. So thank you, Jane and Maite, for all your comments. Now, to all our viewers, we're going to take a little break so we can have a little chat about María Luisa's work, and we'll be right back. So just hold on and stay there. Welcome back, everybody. María Luisa, we have discussed the work you presented to our committee, and we have unanimously decided to give you a grade of sobresaliente. So congratulations. We are very happy with your work, and we really, really are proud of what you did. And I'm really, really happy that you chose to give a new voice to your father. It's really exciting, and it's really I think it's very honorable, and he would be very proud of the work you did. So congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank all of you.
And thank you for allowing me to participate in this. I loved it. See,
Thank you very much.
I was telling you the truth, María Luisa, that this would be a conversation among friends about things we care about.
Definitely.
It's not a grilling.
No, definitely. Thank you.
That was it.
So, does anybody want to say some last words before I close the transmission?
Just anyone who is watching this, buy the book.
Yeah, I think
You see by the book.
it's very
Read it and read it.
very
Read the book.
And read it. Yeah.
Yes.
It contains very, very important information especially for our times. We need to
Yes.
be active citizens, and it's one of the things that Attorney Fuster, Judge Fuster also talks about the responsibilities, not only the rights. We are not only suited with rights, but you also have responsibilities. So
Right.
yeah, it's a book worth reading. So we encourage everyone to read it. Once more, thank you very much, Attorney Oronoz and Dr. Professor Jaime Ramirez for being here, and thank to everybody that was listening in. See you next semester. This is our last defense, so see you next semester, and take care.